Well, here we go. Another edition of the podcast, this time for a Tuesday. Today, our sports business expert, guru, if you will, Brian Cooper, and our own John Shannon will be with us. Before we get to that, if you're looking for an amazing spot to enjoy a glass or a great select of artisan cheese in Niagara's wine country, Stoney Ridge Estate Winery is your best bet. They can now offer intimate, private, outdoor wine tastings in one of their lush garden patios. It's simply one of the nicest places to enjoy a glass of wine in Ontario. And if you need to, you can also stock your pantry. They've got as many as 30 local and international cheeses available at the winery as well. Better yet, have a custom paired wine and cheese tasting on the patio. You can call or email the winery to book your tasting experience. To get all the latest updates and new releases, visit StoneyRidge.com or check them out on Facebook or Instagram. With our own John Shannon and Brian Cooper. Guys, here we go again. The subject of conversation continues to be about the same, and that's all these leagues, all these sports starting up in the midst of the COVID epidemic, which is reaching record proportions almost every day in the United States. The NHL had 30 positive tests in phase 2, another 13 positive tests outside of phase 2. That's of about 600 players. 2 MLS teams are out. Major League Baseball and the NBA, set to start their seasons in a few weeks, have had dozens, even hundreds of positive tests. Brian, in a nutshell, why are these leagues coming back?
Well, Bob, I think we all know why. It's all about the money. And, you know, from the broadcast revenue, from the sponsorship revenue, down to the merchandising that they'll be able to sell in this new pandemic outfit. It's all about survival in many cases for the teams as well as the leagues. These efforts are driven by the leagues as well as the teams. I think the league has as much to lose, if not more, than the individual teams. So they're going to try their damnedest to put on some type of competition. It is not what sponsors have paid for or broadcasters have paid for, because I think it's compromised in many different ways, whether or not they have the best players on the court or on the ice, whether or not they have the excitement and the broadcast experience of a live crowd cheering on a team. All of that changes, and so it's all about the money.
But Brian, wouldn't you
go ahead, John?
Wouldn't you say, no, Brian, wouldn't you say more than anything the way you described it there? This is just contractual more than anything else. This is just fulfilling what leagues have promised all of their partners in order
John,
to try to do it.
You're right, but it's survival as well. I mean, if you look at an organization like MLS and E, that, you know, they have their midweek games contracts from the broadcaster. The league itself gets the national broadcast dollars, which is then distributed to the clubs in some form. But to talk about these sponsors, and to be honest with you, you know, we are dealing with some of our clients right now and going back to the clubs, and they're being very empathetic to the situation. But they're also saying, okay, we signed up for this. We're not getting that value. How do we solve this? What's the solution to this? And these are significant dollars. You know, if you have a venue that you're paying naming rights for, these are significant when they don't have the opening shot of, you know, live from Scotiabank Arena, or they don't have the, you know, the rondelle in the middle court. It's branding exposure that isn't being delivered.
Well, one of the things that you have specialized in over the years, you'll correct me if I'm misrepresenting this, but it is things like the Scotiabank deal, and it's rink boards too. Is that entirely are the numbers for rink boards and on field signage, are they based more on television dollars or television eyeballs than they are people inside the facility itself?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, the 19,000 people that come to the games are, certainly they're a captive audience that you can be doing in-stadium promotions as well, Bob. It's not just the branding in there. There's, intercepts where people will be signing up for a certain product or services at the arena itself. It's the impact that you can have in the arena. But the larger audience is the national audience that every Leaf game has and every Raptor game has. And so, and again, it's not just MLS, it's right across the country. It's right across North America that, they are losing funds by not getting the sponsorship dollars, or they're trying to value what the sponsors have lost. I think both sides are being, again, very reasonably, or taking a reasonable approach to this, that let's see what happens. But I think that they're force-fitting a restart. To be honest with you, I thought it was going to be, let's get ready for the next season.
Well, are there I assume there are some kinds of guarantees in terms of eyeballs in most of these contracts, or not?
Well, there's also a clause called force majeure, which is an act of God that comes along, whether a tornado or a tsunami or whatever, and wipes out the venue or wipes out the teams or whatever, and that they can say, we couldn't anticipate this. Does force majeure work with this? That's something that lawyers are going to have to figure out. But I would say that, it certainly is reasonable to think that there is some element to it. But at the same time, if you're paying, do you continue to pay if you're not getting the brand exposure that you talked about, Bob? I
would argue that Scotiabank's going to win big, Brian. When because they're going to have at least 25 games over a period of time, probably 10 days. That is all Scotiabank now, and there are other sponsors for the other teams that are going to lose, but Scotiabank, because every game's going to be played in the East, in the arena with their name on it, they're going to be the big winner, and they're not going to have to worry about paying for that private box. They're not going to have to worry about any of that activation in the arena, and this might be the easiest way for them to say, hey, listen, that $40 million a year we paid for that naming deal, it is paid off again. It paid off the day they got John Tavares, and it's paying off again in August and September.
John, I would actually, I don't fully agree with you, because any venue, of course, any venue that is supposed to have 285 events a year, whether it's rock concerts, whether it's conventions, whether it is hockey, their teams, there's other reasons and ways that they get value out of it as well. They have IP rights related to the team logos and brands, and when the teams aren't active, you can't really do some digital content play when the teams aren't active. And so it's the highlights of the night before, it's the greatest goal scored the week. Those type of things lose their relevance.
But that's gonna happen if the tournament starts on time, and that's gonna happen. They're the bank with the deal that they did. I mean, they're just mitigating losses too. Let's face it. This is a world of mitigating losses. This is not a world of activating. Yes. It's mitigating.
And you're right. And that's why I think that they're all going into this with a reasonable approach, that we're all underwater here, and how we're going to get out of this together. And I think, but now it's agreeing on what's the valuation on both sides. And I think, look, we're dealing with teams right across the country, and all of them had that same attitude of, okay, how can we get out of this? But, going forward, should they have done a restart? Let me give you this. You get 12 players on a team that have tested and they're out now, and 6 of them are their most formidable players. Do you really have a season that's true to the sport? Yeah, of course
not. With Brian Cooper and John Shannon. So I'm hypothesizing here, Coop. I'm a sponsor. and I'm sitting there and I'm obligated, at least at this point, pending, some legal ruling, I think, obligated to fulfill the contract that I agreed to at the beginning of the season, which is that my sponsorship dollars will kick in as soon as these leagues start up again. But now I get adverse reaction from the general public, from my consumers, who say, this thing is falling apart. This is a bad idea. You are exposing people to this virus. You are a sponsor. Therefore, you are responsible for this. What are you going to do about it? And yourself, there will be some people out there that will say this. Do you think you can use that in any way as leverage to get out of these deals?
Look, every big brand is concerned about reputational risk, and they associate with athletes, they associate with teams to get the halo effect of it. They certainly don't associate to get a negative effect of it. And that is something that all of these brands look at when the leagues are, what I think in many cases, starting to ensure that they can finish the season in order to get the revenues. And Bob, you're correct. Some people will come back and say, we're putting everything at risk to do this. We're not opening schools, yet we're opening, team play. We're not opening restaurants, yet we're opening team play. The other side of it is opening of sports is a bit of a sign of normalcy. Like, we've come back to what we used to be. One thing I could say about this COVID situation is people realized how much sport were a part of their life, how much it was a part of their conversation, how much it was part of their entertainment life as well. And it's not just from watching it, it's the kids playing, Pop Warner and playing Little League and all of those things. And so I think, there will be some that say this is irresponsible. And some sponsors, the sponsors are really indirectly associated. They've signed a contract. They're going out there, and the league is doing their best to bring back the sport. Again, I'm not knocking the NHL or NBA at this point in time. The protocol that they put everybody through is amazing. The players, the trainers, the coaching staff, anyone associated with that is amazing. Will it work? I have real doubts. Doubts.
Brian, the thing for me is that, and to Bob's point, this is supposed to be short term. When you sign a 10-year deal, what happens for 6, 8, 10 months early in your contract, you're going to have to ride the wave. You're going to have to, because you can't run the risk as a sponsor, as a corporate partner. You can't run the risk 24 months from now to say that your team went on a Stanley Cup run or an NBA championship run and you're not part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that.
But I think Bob's question is, let's say this thing doesn't work. Let's say it spreads like crazy. They have to shut down the season. It becomes a very public failure of trying to bring sport back. Let's say some of the families of the players get it. Let's say it spreads to others in the Edmonton area, whatever. That is the question of the reputational risk.
Well, but I would say that in anything that particular, well, in both leagues, in the NBA as well, and in the NHL, the leagues and the players' associations have taken such forward positions. The sponsors really haven't been out there. The sponsors really haven't been pushing it near as much as the two governing bodies of the leagues have. And so perhaps if it does happen, it's very easy to point the finger and say, listen, we're just sitting here, with our obligations contractually, and we just did what the leagues and the players associations wanted us to do.
Well, there's another point here, Brian, too, if I can. I'm sure we've all turned the television set on, whether it's to one of the sports networks or someplace else. And one of the things that's been very noticeable is the diminishing number of commercials that we are watching. Companies that spend tens, hundreds of millions of dollars a year in advertising have pulled back. And that is certainly understandable. We have become kind of a Netflix environment here in North America now, and they don't have commercial content. So now they're being forced, essentially, by contracts that they signed earlier, to advertise in an environment that they themselves have chosen not to advertise. Now, I'm not saying that's true for everybody, but there are a whole boatload of high-end television and radio advertisers who have disappeared from the environment since COVID started. And now, if they had an NHL deal, now they're being forced to put their commercial message back on. Boy, I'll tell you, Brian, if I was running one of those corporations and I had this gun to my head, I'd be calling my lawyers and yelling and screaming. Are you aware of any of the corporations that have done this yet?
No, I'm not. And you know what, to Bob, the only two that really have been broadcast are UFC, which are limited to the type and number of sponsors that they have because of the nature of the content, and PGA golf. You get one NHL or NBA game, and when this starts up shortly, that starts pulling in some significant numbers because people are sports starved, they're competition starved. They will be happy to be back. They right now we need numbers, and they will be happy to be back. Believe me. And so it's sort of a wait and see. And you're right, they're contractually obligated. But I think what's going to happen is, you know, the first hockey, NFL, NBA game that comes on, there's going to be significant numbers. We're indoors in many cases. Other than golfing is the only sport that you can really play outdoors these days. People haven't seen it for quite some time. I believe when it comes back, you're going to see significant uptick in broadcast numbers.
Hey, Brian, all of these companies, all of these leagues look well down the road. There has to be a concern about corporate sponsorship in 12 months, in 24 months, when you consider how many dollars are going to be available. How do you plan for post-COVID when you don't really know what the business is like?
Well, and John, you know what? This is all new. There's no precedent in this thing. This is the only thing you can say. This is similar to coming out of a lockout, where that you did not know when it was going to end. And so we've had that experience. And to be honest with you, the team at MKTG, they are talking to the clients and saying, okay, how do we come out of this? One, how do you come out and what type of message do you talk? I mean, if you come out just like business as usual, I don't think that's the right way to do it. You know, we as a society have gone through something that has set us back in many, many different ways. There's some positives that have come out of this, without a doubt. So what is your message coming back to the sport that we all love, to the game that you paid heavily to be associated with? What is the messaging? It's not just a brand sell. It's like, okay, you know, I think you have to take in the fact that, you know, not everybody came out of this really good. Like people have lost their lives.
Hey, would you recommend to your clients that if, I mean, right now the critical date for the start of the next season in the NHL apparently is December the 1st. I don't buy it, but that's my personal opinion. But if they decide to start with people not in the seats, even some level of people in the seats, would you advise your partners to back off a bit? I mean, I don't think we can go through next season without people in the buildings. Do you?
Well, I think what may be developing is a digital arena where the broadcast will be the same, and there will be some innovative way that almost creates a crowd experience to the viewer. I think the sponsors are going to have to pivot from in-arena promotions to online promotions, second and third screen. I think you know, and this, look, innovation has just been advanced. You know, what would have taken 2 years is now taking 2 months. And so I think that is going to happen, that they're going to flip, you know, they will still have the branding, as Bob referred to earlier, or the dasher boards or the on-court, but now it'll be going to second screen promotions to interact. There'll be an opportunity for fans to interact with each other. There will be a virtual hosting in a box type thing. All of those things are coming forward. There are a bunch of companies out there that are much smarter than us that are really developing those now. And so that's where we will, as an organization, we will look to our clients and say, here's what is out there in terms of the landscape. Here's what we think you should be doing, both on the messaging, how to interact with the fan, how to get your brand exposure.
Well, first of all, there may be one or two companies that are smarter than us, but there aren't that many.
I was waiting for that.
Yeah.
I was waiting for that.
I want to touch on a couple of other important things. Let's start with the NCAA. The Big Ten has now announced that their season is going to be strictly in conference. They're not going to play any non-conference games. But as I understand it, there are still plans to have stadiums open and 100,000 as many as 100,000 people in a stadium at once. This is a disaster waiting to happen, and it is going to happen. And as I got into a conversation with somebody just yesterday and pointed out, I said, do you know how many college football games are played on a given Saturday afternoon? Almost 200.
Mm-hmm.
Put that into the context of a Major League Baseball season where you get 15 games in a day. The NHL might have 11 or 12 on a normal day. The NBA comparable. We are talking on a Saturday from 12 noon until 1 in the morning when the West Coast finishes. 200 games. This is insanity, Coop, isn't it?
It is. It's irresponsible. And by the way, those out of conference games are the big money makers for those clubs. Mm-hmm. I could tell you that, a lot of these NCAA organizations, the universities, they are going to be taking the biggest revenue hit that they've had in their life. Not about, students not enrolling, because I think, between the online courses and the staggered on campus stuff, it is the revenue from their sports teams. It's the revenue from the broadcasting. It's the merchandise that they're selling around the football team. This is going to be a game changer for them. And I agree with you. Go to the big house. You put 117,000 kids in those stands with alcohol, even though they don't sell it on site. Believe me, you're going to have a 3-week lag, and there's going to be a major breakout of the virus itself. Let's hope there's a vaccine by then.
Well, there won't be a vaccine by the 1st of October. No. The one thing I would say is that based on what you're seeing with a few of the states, and some of those states have been pretty active. Gavin Newsom, the governor in California, has moved everything back with college football in California. Pac-12 has done the same thing, Bob. They're not playing any out of conference. Mike DeWine in Ohio. These guys are not going to risk anything, and if the universities want to do it, and if the governing bodies want to do it, the governors will not let them. And at a certain point, government will have to step in and tell sports to stop. And that if this spike continues, Bob, it'll be sooner than later.
Look at Texas.
Sorry, Brian.
Texas, Florida. These are big football. And basketball.
Huge. California too.
But we've seen a pivot. We've seen a pivot in the governor in Texas. We have seen he has changed his tune. I don't think Ron DeSantis in Florida will ever change his tune, which is a huge issue for the people of Florida, which is very sad. But I'll tell you what: if this thing continues the way it looks like it's going to continue, then football will not be played. There will not. I mean, there won't even be summer practices, let alone. I mean, when you think about how many Clemson players, how many LSU players, it's ridiculous.
One of the other major attractions here in Canada, at least, is the Canadian Hockey League. There are about, John, 60 CHL franchises?
I think 52, Bob. I think.
Okay, so, but we are talking about both large, medium, and small markets and especially in the small and medium-sized markets where junior hockey is the sports entertainment vehicle of that area and region. They shut down in March. They did not play a Memorial Cup. And now they are facing the prospect. This is not a league that can economize through television dollars. It is purely gate driven. They cannot play with people in the stands. And now they are facing the reality of deciding to shut down for an entire year. And I am told that when that happens, effectively, every single player under contract to those teams will become a free agent and able to make other decisions. And you guys know, in these hockey communities across the country, these kids, many of them will opt to go to the U.S. Hockey League or to colleges when they have that opportunity, because it'll be the only place to play. Shannon, I'll give it to you first, and then Brian. What do you make of this?
Right now, if you have played in the Canadian Hockey League, you can't go play U.S. college hockey because you've lost your eligibility at this point. Now, that may change, but I doubt it.
I am told that this will change, John, if in fact they do not play this year.
But here's the new business model that is changing, and it's happening a couple of places. There's a little league in British Columbia. There's one in Ontario. Basically, what we're talking about is creating development leagues. All these players think that this is a stepping stone to go play pro hockey somewhere. So they're going to be pay as you play. You are not, you're going to pay to join a league. At a certain point, somebody's going to make the decision that, the Ontario Junior League, the Tier 2 league, if you want, is going to be a pay as you play. And you pay to play on that team, you play to be developed, and you don't have to worry about people in the seats. And that's right now, Bob, that I see that as the only option, because you're right. Those 52 teams, as good as some of them and wealthy as some of them are, if they can't put people in the seats, like in London or in Windsor, or some place, or Calgary and Edmonton, if you can't do that, you've got major issues. And what I do think this will create in the next 12 months a redefining of player development on every level for the NHL. We might see something totally different in 12 months or 2 years if they can't get back on the ice.
Coop, your perspective on this?
Well, first of all, it's the greatest developmental league for hockey in the world. I mean, the number of players that have come out there, they're actually the basis of our World Juniors teams every year. I think that there may be an opportunity in this case for the NHL to come in. And while they have a loose association right now, the opportunity is creating your own G League that they currently have. And so I would think the players would see that as, okay, this is a closer connection. And John, I agree with you. Every player wants to continue the development as it goes along, and he's going to look at the next best opportunity. I got to tell you though, that I was closely associated with the inner workings of that organization, that we did a piece of consulting work for them. That is a strong league. There are some teams that are failing, but there are a lot of teams that do really well. I think there's 6 American teams as well. But, in the heartland of Canada, these teams some of them are making a ton of money. And they have developed some fantastic players out of it. And they get a really loyal base. So I think they may be able to go through one season surviving it financially. But I think the point is to what Bob and you're saying is the players. So there may be some type of hybrid relationship develop out of this that is currently different with the NHL that they currently have.
Listen, I think that we're also talking not just about junior hockey. I think we're talking about minor pro hockey too. I mean, the American Hockey League, the American Hockey League runs a similar model. And right now, and Dave Andrews has just left there as the president and did a marvelous job. But every NHL team has an American league,
an associated team.
What if they can't play? What if they can't play? Where's the development of their second and third year pros going to go? Right now, one of the issues, I'll tell you what, one of the issues right now is there are a lot of American League level players that are trying to sign in Europe, that are going to leave North America and go to Europe because they think there's a better chance to play in September and October and November for European teams, particularly the KHL, than there is to play in North America.
Well, I
guys,
question whether Russia's got it under control, but go ahead.
But they're going to play anyway.
Time is
They're
our
going to play anyway, Coop.
Yeah, they probably will. As sports returns, both at the professional and apparently amateur level here in North America, the only word that I can think of that kind of defines where we are is uncertainty. Everywhere you turn,
Totally.
you just don't know what the answers are going to be.
No.
Guys, always a pleasure. Thanks, Coop. Good to see you. Stay healthy. Shannon, we'll see you on later this week when we throw another one of these out there. Thanks,
Cheers.
guys. And
Take care, guys.
for watching and for making this right now the #1 sports podcast in the country. We appreciate it. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.